Hello there. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Motorsports Addict. Today I am talking about Marc Marquez. I'll be talking about his not so surprising move to the factory Ducati team for 2025 and the implications of that move for Ducati and for the rest of the grid for next season and beyond. I will also look at the way Jorge Martin was treated by the Ducati factory in the process. Was it fair to Martin? Or was it just the business of racing? Does fairness even matter? Am I naive to talk about fairness in sports in this context? Join me as I look at the issues. But before I start, I'd like to appeal to you. Please give this video a like. It helps the YouTube algorithm to promote the channel and encourages me to keep creating content. Thank you. I admit that I'm a huge fan of Pecco Bagnaia and Marc Marquez. I have a lot of respect for both riders and what they've been able to achieve in their careers. But I also have a lot of respect for Jorge Martin's talents and the work he has to put in to challenge these two dominant riders. Jorge has been the most dominant rider of 2024, proving that he's one of the best riders on the current MotoGP grid. I hope you don't think it's strange that I'm a fan of both Marquez and Bagnaia. I think they're two of the most gifted riders in a grid full of amazing talents. Marquez is certainly one of the greatest riders to ever race a motorbike, as the record books show. He's an absolute legend. Bagnaia has won back-to-back world championships, and I think that over time he will eventually prove that he deserves to have his name discussed among the greatest in the sport. And then there's Jorge Martin. Now that he's been confirmed as an Aprilia rider for 2025, a part of me would low-key like to see him win the title and take the #1 plate to Aprilia as payback to Ducati and to prove a point. I hope you don't find it strange, but I love a good comeback story. Well, some of the most important decisions of the MotoGP 2024 silly season have finally been answered. We now know where Marquez, Martin and Bastianini will ride next season. Before I continue, I want to thank you for watching and for your support. If you like my content, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. You could also please leave a comment and share with a friend. I appreciate your support. Thank you. Speculation had been rife since the beginning of the season over Ducati's final decision on their riders for 2025. And every day, news reports were getting more frenzied as riders like Quartararo and Aleix Espargaro announced their decisions for next season. The Ducati situation had become key to the rest of the driver market for 2025 and beyond, as nobody could move without knowing where the key riders were going. Ever since Marc Marquez joined the Gresini squad for 2024 and indicated his firm interest in the factory Ducati team, the entire grid had waited to see how this would pan out. With Marquez and Martin desperately angling for the factory ride that was currently occupied by Bastianini, it was clear that someone was going to get their heart broken. In fact, unless Ducati was able to juggle all their talented riders very carefully, at least two riders were likely to be bitterly disappointed. Martin was on the satellite Pramac bike, which had the same factory spec as the official Ducati team. Martin was actually signed on a factory Ducati contract, even though he raced for the satellite team. Supposedly, the Pramac team enjoyed full factory support from Ducati engineers and technicians. They were effectively a second factory team. But Martin wanted the full factory team status, not just the bike. Rumors had it that the factory Ducati seat was promised to Martin for the 2025 season after he was passed up for promotion from Pramac for the 2023 and 2024 seasons. In 2022, after considering both Martin and Bestia for 2023, Ducati promoted Bastianini from Gresini to replace Jack Miller, who was leaving for KTM. Martin was passed up for promotion again in 2024. Reports had it that there was a clause in his contract that guaranteed automatic promotion to the factory squad if he won the 2023 World Championship while at Pramac. I think for Ducati, this is based on making sure that the world champion, who was entitled to ride with the #1 plate, would race for the factory squad for the following season, regardless whether he won the title on an official factory bike or a satellite. Remember, if Martin won and stayed with Pramac, it would be embarrassing for the factory squad not to have the world champion on their official factory bike. It would mean that the factory team had been beaten by a customer squad, which had fewer resources available to it. Unfortunately, Martin lost the 2023 title race to Bagnaia, and the chance for automatic promotion was gone. So Martin returned to Pramac for 2024, upset and fired up to prove a point to Ducati and the rest of the grid. From the beginning of the 2024 season, it was clear that Martin wanted the factory seat. In fact, he had been openly challenging Ducati to promote him since 2022. He had even stated that he believed he had done enough to convince Ducati that he deserved promotion to the full factory team, and there was nothing more for him to prove. He started the season very strongly, dominating the sprint races and race weekends to take a very strong lead in the championship. Right from the beginning of the season, Martin declared that this would be his final year at Pramac. He would not accept another year on satellite machinery. If he wasn't promoted to Ducati for 2025, he would leave the Ducati fold and sign for another factory. Marquez also started the season strongly on the Gresini Ducati, declaring that he was fully acclimated with the bike by the Jerez GP. He scored a series of podiums to leave Ducati with a very strong dilemma. There was a clear contest between Martin and Marquez for the factory seat. On any given day, the pendulum swung between both riders. But who would Ducati choose? At first, the solution seemed obvious. Promote Martin to factory Ducati and leave Marquez in Pramac with a full factory bike. This would of course leave Bestia out of the factory squad, but at least Ducati would have kept their two strongest riders happy. Marquez initially appeared to favour this option. He declared that he just wanted the best bike for 2025, and he didn't particularly care for the colour of the bike or the identity of the team. However, something changed for Marquez by the Mugello race weekend, when he declared that joining Pramac for 2025 was not an option for him. He announced that he had offers from other factories, and he was prepared to sign for another manufacturer team if Ducati didn't want him. Clearly alluding to advances from KTM and Aprilia, Marquez was now playing hardball with Ducati. Why did Marquez change his mind? I can only imagine that he was emboldened by his race results and the knowledge that with his speed and his record, he was the most attractive rider on the grid, who deserved to be with a factory team with the best bike. I think the fact that other teams were interested in his services for 2025 also encouraged him to demand the very best package. This left Ducati with a serious problem. 2 into 1 just don't go, with both Martin and Marquez stating that they would only accept the official ride. One person would have to leave the team. Martin continued to put the screw into Ducati, giving interviews where he stated his case. He even set a deadline for Ducati to decide, failing which he would sign for another team. Ducati had a hard choice to make. It also seemed easier to promote Martin to Ducati because Marquez had a lot of sponsor clashes. Most notably, Marquez had been backed by Red Bull for most of his career, while factory Ducati was sponsored by Monster Energy. There were also conflicts with Oakley Eyewear, Samsung, Lenovo, and Estrella Galicia, amongst others. But Marquez declared that he was willing to cut ties with his sponsors in order to ride the Ducati. He was prepared to be ruthless in order to win again. On the other hand, Martin was younger and fast, definitely one for the future as his career was still unfolding. He would also be cheaper because he didn't have the same legacy of records and titles. Marquez at 31 had far less career ahead of him. He would also demand a much higher salary and bonuses due to his status as one of the most decorated riders in the sport. While Marquez and Martin would both deliver titles, especially when paired with Bagnaia, Marquez was more likely to disturb the harmony within the team with his mind games and his highly competitive nature. Reportedly, Marquez refused Ducati's offer for the factory seat to be determined by a head-to-head competition between himself and Martin because he didn't have equal machinery. Marquez also had a difficult rivalry with Bagnaia going back several seasons. They had exchanged a few harsh words in the past due to these mind games played by Marquez. They had a strong rivalry in the actual races. In fact, they had already clashed on track this season, resulting in a crash that took out both riders in Portimao, which was ruled a racing incident. This was also followed by the duel in Jerez, which Pecco won. Marquez also had tension with the VR46 stable, of which Bagnaia was the most successful rider. This was due to Marquez's rivalry with team founder Valentino Rossi. Marquez had even been engaged in a war of words with Marco Bezzecchi, another VR46 squad member, and there was no telling how Marquez's arrival at factory Ducati would affect the balance, given that the VR46 team also raced Ducati bikes. Marquez could also be very dominant. Already he was the fastest GP23 bike in 2024, and he was also often quicker than the GP24 bikes of Bastianini and Morbidelli. But there was also a real risk that letting Marquez go would mean Ducati was inadvertently strengthening the rival team. There is no predicting what Marquez would do with the Aprilia, which was already proven to be highly competitive in the hands of Maverick Vinales and Aleix Espargaro. The KTM was also doing quite well for Pedro Acosta, who started the season very strongly and had scored a few podium finishes already in his debut season. While Binder had also proved that the KTM was capable of lightning starts in addition to Acosta's strong finishes. From all accounts, both KTM and Aprilia had very strong packages, and they both just needed a superstar rider to squeeze the last ounces of performance from their bikes. Marquez had proven that he could be strong on the Ducati. After years of dominating the grid on the Honda, he had adapted very quickly to a completely new bike. And if he was allowed to leave, he could just as easily adapt to a KTM or Aprilia and be back to competing for race wins next season. There was no doubt that Marquez was an alien talent. Most people suspected that he was in a league of his own, and perhaps none of the other riders could match him on equal machinery. If Marquez had a genuinely fast bike, could he combine that with his alien talent and all the other tools in his arsenal to dominate the World Championship again? Will Ducati really risk letting Marquez leave their stable to challenge their riders and deliver a title to KTM or Aprilia? In the end, Ducati chose Marquez, bidding goodbye to a very disappointed Martin. To Martin, it would have felt like a kick in the teeth, like being dumped by a lover who'd led you on for years. It would definitely have been heartbreaking to be passed over for promotion for a third time. He promptly announced his departure to Aprilia on the Monday after Mugello. Martin will finally get his wish, to be a full factory rider on a competitive Italian bike, albeit the Aprilia and not his preferred Ducati Panigale, while Bastianini has signed for KTM. For Ducati, this is monumental. The greatest rider of the past decade is now on the fastest bike, their bike. The perfect pairing of two of the fastest and most dominant riders on the grid right now. The only two back-to-back champions still racing in the Premier class, and the strongest possible opportunity to dominate the MotoGP class until the rules overhaul comes into effect at the end of 2026. For Marquez, this is huge. It's the ultimate proof of his star power, that he was able to force the hand of Ducati to hand him the factory bike, overriding their previous misgivings about doing so. That Ducati picked him over hotshot Jorge Martin, whom they had all but promised a ride before Marquez came along. It also gives him a chance to equal Valentino Rossi's record of Premier Class titles and set a new benchmark for the next generation of riders. But while I'm a Marquez and Pecco fan, I feel really sorry for Martin. I know he's been a bit too outspoken this season with his demands, and I can't help but feel that the Ducati bosses felt somewhat irritated by his attempts to manipulate negotiations through the media. But Martin has also been genuinely fast, and he has done enough to convince the entire grid of his speed and consistency. Martin has been the most consistent rider in 2024, with 2 Grand Prix wins and 3 sprint victories. He also holds an 18-point lead in the World Championship. Marquez has not quite been as successful. He's got 3 Grand Prix podiums and 5 sprint podiums after just 7 rounds. But remember, Marquez is on older, less competitive machinery, which he's just adapting to. But Marquez is a superstar and a marketing machine. Since Valentino Rossi retired, MotoGP has missed having a superstar of his stature. Pecco, Quartararo and Mir, the other world champions on the grid, are still young, and none of them seems to have or crave the charisma and personality that Rossi brought to the sport. Marquez has definitely improved his self-promotion in 2024. He's the biggest personality in the sport, which will be of huge marketing benefit to Ducati. He will certainly be a bigger marketing draw than Jorge Martin. The risk now is that Ducati have now given Martin all the motivation he needs to fight for this year's championship so that he can take the number 1 plate away. Remember, he still holds a lead over Bagnaia and Marquez going into the summer break. The implications are that if Martin wins, he will be going to Aprilia next season as the world champion with the right to put the number 1 plate on his bike. And what a coup this would be for Aprilia. They would have the number 1 plate on their star rider's bike without having won the world title themselves. This would be a marketing dream. This would also hurt Ducati, knowing that they had gifted the number 1 plate to their Italian rivals and passed up the chance to have it on their Ducati bike for 3 seasons in a row. I think Ducati will do everything in their power to avoid this by backing Marquez and Bagnaia to ensure that one of their factory riders wins a title this year and they go into 2025 with the number 1 plate on the factory Ducati. Ducati will support Marquez and Bagnaia to win a title in 2024. How will this happen? First, there will be no more updates for Martin. I imagine Bestia will also not get updates to his GP24. Since he's also leaving the team, there's no point giving Martin and Bastianini the tools to win the title and take a number 1 plate to another team. This will also avoid both riders being able to take information about the latest Ducati upgrades and developments to their new teams for 2025. I imagine there will be more updates for Marquez to give him the best tools to fight the 2024 bikes. Remember, even though Marquez is on a 2023 bike, he wasn't given the latest spec of that machine. The GP23 bike that Bagnaia, Bastianini, Digi and Martin rode at the end of 2023 had updates that were not included on the bike that was eventually passed on to Marquez and the other GP23 riders in 2024. I imagine that Ducati will now try to give him as many upgrades as possible to aid him in the title fight. Bagnaia will of course get all the latest upgrades for his GP24 machine. And I imagine Morbidelli will also get the same upgrades to enable him compete. Will there be tension between Marquez and Pecco? Only time will tell. But so far, Bagnaia has said he welcomes the chance to learn from the legend. What does this mean for Pramac Ducati? Well, this move has definitely weakened Pramac. They've lost Jorge Martin and the chance to sign Marquez and Bastianini. They will have Morbidelli, who has struggled to adapt to the Ducati after years on the Yamaha. They will also likely have the rookie Fermin Aldeguer. But you wouldn't ordinarily expect a rookie to set the grid on fire. And then you remember Pedro Acosta in 2024 and Marc Marquez before him, and you realize that anything is possible. But Pramac don't have a guaranteed frontrunner riding their bikes at the moment. With all respect to Morbidelli, he's been the slowest of the 2024 bikes so far, and he's often been slower than the GP23s as well. Without a proven race winner, Pramac will not challenge for victories or even podiums as consistently as they're doing now. Without race results, they will be less attractive to sponsors. This is going to hurt. Bastianini and Martin are now racing for themselves. They are less likely to play the team game in terms of race strategy. The Beast is more likely to attack Pecco, denying him a race win or even risking a crash in order to secure a better result for himself. Whereas if you're staying in the team, he might be more willing to hold position and protect his teammates in a title race. Both Martin and Bestia are now more likely to be aggressive in challenging other Ducati riders, especially Marquez and Bagnaia, since they know they are leaving the team. But I also expect all the riders to be professional, because there are no permanent friends or enemies in a grid as small as the MotoGP community. Riders and team personnel change all the time, and there's no point burning bridges that might be needed in the future. I'm looking forward to next season, and indeed to the end of this season. I can't wait. How do you think the 2024 season will unfold? Who do you think will win the World Championship? Does Marquez have a realistic chance? Or is this a 2-horse race between Pecco and Martin? Will Martin and Marquez cancel each other out in their quest to take out the World Championship for this season? Only time will tell. Thank you very much for watching. Please comment and like this video, and please also show your support by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.